What is the definition of intelligence? Is it our ability to remember volumes of information, or is it something else? I was struck by this quote from a talk that Steve Jobs gave, the founder of Apple, which I thought I'd read for you so that you'd be able to see the importance of what I'm saying in this particular context of intelligence. So according to Steve Jobs, he says the key to being truly smart isn't deep expertise in one field, but instead the ability to make unexpected connections between fields. What's very interesting about this is that he's not talking about hyper-specialization. He's talking about forming connections and patterns between various things. Steve Jobs goes on to explain, a lot of what it means to be smart is the ability to zoom out, like you're in a city and that you could look at the whole thing from the 80th floor down at the city. And while other people are trying to figure out how to get from point to A to point B, reading these stupid little maps, you could just see it in front of you. You can see the whole thing. Steve goes on to say, you have to not have the same bag of experiences as everybody else does, or else you're going to make the same connections and you won't be innovative at all. So what you can see by all of this, what Steve Jobs is talking about and all these very intelligent people who have innovated and who have come up with revolutionary ideas is saying that you've got to, and we use this word, think outside the box. But it's more than that, because you're not supposed to see a box because you're in an entirely different world. So when you take psychedelics, or when you develop the practices of meditation or being still, then you gain a new perspective on things. In line with what Steve Jobs is saying, there's a wonderful quote by Richard Feynman, an incredible quantum physicist and an incredible human being that saw the world very differently to most physicists in today's times. He says, in this age of specialization, men who thoroughly know one field are often incompetent to discuss another. The great problems of the relations between one and another aspect of human activity have for this reason been discussed less and less in public. This is from Richard Feynman. So what he's saying is that we can't make those relationships. We can't see the big picture, whether it comes to our lives or when it comes to the problem that we're trying to solve. Same with family situations, children in our family, a conflict with in-laws or things like that. We're not looking at the big picture because we're too focused. And that's the problem. When you focus, you miss the big picture and you get trapped in thinking that that's the problem and that you're stuck. So what we can learn from these great men like Richard Feynman and Steve Jobs is that specialization is not the secret to developing a robust understanding of your role on Earth and solving problems as well. Albert Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. He also said, we cannot solve problems with the same level of thinking that created them. So you can tell from these great people of history that intelligence is very different to the modern day interpretation of intelligence. The modern day interpretation of intelligence is your ability to remember and consume large amounts of information and repeat them verbatim. The traditional, robust, innovative mind is totally different. It's a mind that explores connections that others would not have made. It's vast, it's open, it's never stuck in one particular way. Jeff Bezos also talks about this ability that he looks for in intelligence, and he defines it as someone who is able to change their minds frequently. All of this is saying that the way we're approaching our lives and the way that we're approaching our jobs and the way we're approaching the planet needs a lot of refinement. Looking at the world differently and seeing things that other people can't see and creating patterns where other people can't see the patterns. We're looking at things from a big picture. How do you develop these abilities to be able to do all of this so that you can be a dynamic entrepreneur, you can solve problems that other people can't, an effective communicator, and also being able to look at a problem from all different angles, which are all vital skills in today's society, and of course in the workforce and in business and in life generally. So if you look at something that Steve Jobs talks about that people know about as well, is the environment and the ethos that he brought into his company Apple. And part of that was his trip to Japan, where he went and spent time with the Zen masters and learned the practice of Zazen, which is effectively means sitting still, not thinking, not doing anything. He also realized the significance of minimalism and perfecting things in a small way, all imbued in the Zen teaching. And that's what led me a lot to go and discover further. When I took my trip to Japan, and you see in the background is an image that I took when I was in Osaka visiting a Zen garden, which is incredible. It was a wonderful light drizzle in the air, and I noticed this peculiar red rock in the background, and I said, what's the red rock doing in a Zen garden? It doesn't belong there at all. It's just out of place. It shouldn't be there. It's all green and brown, and here's this red rock. But then the thing that struck me so much was that if this red rock wasn't there, this picture wouldn't be the way that it is. It's because it was different, because it stood out, it made the picture so much more interesting. The same way, if you look at the technology industry, it's because Steve Jobs came in with an entirely different way of looking at things and bringing into the technology industry that we have the company called Apple, which is bringing in something that shouldn't belong there in a very focused, hyper-specialized, information-centered mindset, where Steve Jobs came in with a very, very different mind and perception about life, which is very free, very still, very minimal, and looking at things from a holistic perspective as well. So then the practice of Zazen, or the practice of being still, is going to allow you to be able to sit still and let those thoughts settle, because your thoughts are just going to regurgitate the same patterns of before and not bring anything new. If you look up Yuval Harari, who has written incredible works as well, including Homo sapiens, the history of civilization, he spends 2 hours a day in stillness as well. So the whole point is to disassociate from the mind. In other words, to stop taking everything that you think so seriously, because you're trapped in a cycle of repetitive thoughts that lead to nothing useful and nothing interesting at all, because you're thinking the same thoughts, evaluating the same problems, and you're not coming up with anything new. So what you have to do is be able to be still, to be able to allow those thoughts to settle and be quiet. And then, of course, when you apply your mind beyond the brain and your perceptions and your past, that's when you come up with revolutionary ideas that are outside of your gambit of understanding. The other great aspect about this is unlearning. In other words, for you to have a robust mind and to be able to see problems from a different perspective, you have to unlearn everything that you thought you knew. Because when you make a connection and you say, well, that's a blue sky, that's where it stops. The sky is blue, and that's where it ends, which means that there can't be any creative opening within that. But if you take a step back and say, well, why is the sky blue? And what makes it blue? And maybe it's not blue. So by you unlearning and shaking up those belief patterns, those conceptual ideas of what life is and what thinking is, you can now become more robust, which is the process of training your neurons, of unlearning, of making you do things that you don't normally do. Because when you do things that you don't normally do, your neurons start changing patterns and they start opening up. And then they start creating new neural pathways, which the saying that goes so wonderfully is that the neurons that fire together wire together. And so you start creating new patterns and looking at the world very differently. And the word about patterns is really important. Everything in nature works in these incredible patterns. If you look at the spiral dimension, you look at the DNA and how, each helix is this wonderful spiral pattern. If you look at our galaxies, it's in a spiral form. If you look at the top of your hair and how it grows, it's spiral. And you could say, and even our Milky Way is spiral. So there is this unique pattern that we see emerging everywhere, where even if you look at how flowers grow and you see them budding, they're actually doing it in the spiral wave type of thing. So there are huge secrets in this. Then they apply this to various models, and some of the scientists are applying it now to new age technology as well. by looking at patterns in nature and in life. And what I do with my coaching is to bring these robust sets of tools and techniques to you so that you can then enrich all those things that you want to be able to do. So I get you to do things like sitting still, doing nothing, allowing your thoughts to settle. I question and disrupt every thought or belief system that you have. So you're like unsure now. And then you're like, well, maybe if it's not that, maybe it's that. And I say, because now you're opening up your mind to a new perspective and a new way of looking at the world, when once it was a very rigid and very clearly defined boundaries where you couldn't expand into. So I force you to be able to do that. Then I make you to make the unconscious conscious and make the conscious unconscious. What that means is that make you do things that you never did before. Doing odd things, changing things around, wearing different clothes, eating different foods, talking to different people, changing the way you sleep, changing the way that you perceive life. All these types of things start to now create a new neural pathways where you open up to receiving new information, to new perceptions, to seeing life entirely differently. And when you bring all of this together, you become as an individual very empowered, very knowledgeable, and very aware of all the things that are going on in your life instead of being stuck in your head. And so now you become very useful to yourself and very useful to problems in your life, and of course to relationships, at work, everywhere. And even your relationship with your creator, with your divine, with your spirituality, all get nourished because now you're shaking up those existing belief systems that were not accurate. And if you look at it from a health perspective as well, as you age, you become more rigid, your arteries, your bone structures, everything becomes so rigid and stuck. And that's part of your mind as well. So when your mind is not flexible as a child is and be able to bend and move, so your body becomes stiff and rigid and not being able to move. And you become trapped in your own thought processes, and you get trapped in a body that is not flexible and not movable. When you change the way that you think, then your body starts changing too. It becomes more flexible, more robust, more able to do things that it's not able to do. Just how your thoughts are now changing, your body is changing as well, which means that you live a healthier, more robust life where you are not rigid and stuck in your ways, and you're opening to new experiences all the time, so that you can then see problems that other people couldn't. And then you would be able to notice opportunities that other people would have missed, which is great for relationships, for business, for work, and for problem solving as well. But you can't do all of this if you grow up thinking that the conventional education system is going to get you there. It's not. It's those people that went outside of the box, that traveled far and wide, that recognize that there's more to this existence than what meets the eye. And so you have to learn to transcend your body, your mind, and your thinking to truly get a perspective of this incredible universe and the incredible bunch of people that inhabit this planet.